The familiar scent of polished floors and freshly stocked shelves greeted Alex Carter as he stepped through the sliding doors of one of his Carter Mart locations. Dressed in a faded hoodie, worn-out jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face, he blended in effortlessly with the morning crowd. To anyone watching, he was just another customer looking for a good deal. In reality, he was the man who had built this company from the ground up, now walking its aisles as a stranger. He had always believed in staying connected to the front lines of his business, but as Carter Mart expanded, that had become harder. He relied on reports, performance metrics, and executive briefings, but lately something felt off. Customer complaints had started trickling in, vague frustrations about restricted purchases, mysterious policy changes, and unhelpful employees. None of it made sense, and the responses from upper management felt too rehearsed. If something was happening in his stores, he needed to see it for himself. Alex picked up a basket and wandered through the aisles, taking his time. He stopped near a display of household items, pretending to compare prices while watching the employees. Most of them seemed engaged, greeting customers, restocking shelves, or tidying up. At first glance, the store seemed to be running just fine. But as he listened more carefully, he caught small, telling details. A cashier whispering to a coworker, a customer frowning at a receipt, an awkward exchange at customer service. Something was wrong, but he couldn't quite place it yet. He drifted toward the electronics section, stopping to pick up a popular tablet, one of Carter Mart's bestsellers. He checked the price, nodded to himself, and made his way to the checkout. This would be the real test. What happened next would leave him stunned. The line at checkout was moving at a steady pace, the rhythmic beeping of scanned items filling the air. Alex Carter adjusted the basket in his hands, keeping his expression neutral as he waited for his turn. He glanced around, taking in the details, how employees handled customers, whether they seemed rushed or engaged, if anyone looked uncomfortable. He had spent years perfecting Carter Mart's customer experience, and yet, something in the air felt different today. Finally, it was his turn. He placed the tablet on the counter, along with a few smaller items to keep up his cover. The cashier, a young man with an easygoing demeanor, scanned the first few items without issue. But when he reached the tablet, his hand hesitated on the barcode scanner. His smile faded. The cashier, whose name tag read Jake, glanced toward the back of the store as if searching for someone. His Adam's apple bobbed slightly as he looked back at Alex. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, his voice polite but firm. "I can't sell this to you." Alex's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Jake straightened a little, clearing his throat. "It's a store policy." Alex kept his voice casual, tilting his head slightly. "Since when? I don't remember any policy about not selling products that are in stock." Jake's fingers tensed around the tablet. "I'm really sorry, sir. I just can't." There was something in his voice, not just discomfort, but fear. He wasn't making the decision himself. He was following orders. Alex studied him carefully. The kid looked like he genuinely didn't want to refuse the sale, but something or someone was forcing his hand. Alex glanced at the total displayed on the register. The transaction was ready to go through. All Jake had to do was press the final button. And yet, he wasn't doing it. "Listen," Alex said, keeping his tone light, as if he were just a regular customer annoyed by an inconvenience. "If this is some kind of glitch, maybe a manager can override it?" Jake swallowed, his eyes flicking toward the customer service desk before shaking his head. They won't. It's just, I can't sell it." Alex's stomach tightened. What the hell was going on? Alex exhaled slowly, forcing himself to keep his tone in check. He was supposed to be just another customer, a frustrated but regular shopper trying to buy a product. The last thing he needed was to blow his cover. He crossed his arms, tilting his head slightly. "Come on, kid," he said, keeping his voice casual but firm. "I've been shopping here for years. I've never had a problem buying electronics before. What kind of policy is this?" Jake's fingers twitched slightly, still hovering over the register. He looked like he wanted to explain, like he hated being put in this position, but something was stopping him. I'm sorry, sir," he said again, shifting on his feet. "It's just what we were told." "Told by who?" Alex pressed, watching Jake carefully. Jake's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "It's from corporate," he muttered under his breath. Alex's mind spun. "Corporate?" He was corporate, and he sure as hell never approved a policy like this. Before he could push further, movement at another register caught his attention. A woman in her late 40s, standing 2 lanes over, was staring down at her cashier with a similar look of disbelief. She gestured to the item in her cart, a high-end coffee maker. "What do you mean I can't buy it?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "I'm really sorry, ma'am," the cashier responded, shoulders tense. "It's a new policy." Alex turned back to Jake. His heartbeat quickened. This wasn't just about him. This was happening across the store. Another lane, another denial. A man with a set of expensive cookware frowned at his receipt, shaking his head. "This was in my cart, and now it's just gone? You didn't even charge me for it." "I'm really sorry, sir," the cashier repeated. "I can't override it." Alex's hands curled into fists at his sides. This wasn't just one mistake. This was systematic. Something big was happening inside his company, and if employees were this scared to talk about it, then whoever was behind it was making damn sure they stayed quiet. And that meant Alex wasn't leaving the store until he found out the truth. Alex forced a slow breath through his nose, keeping his frustration in check. The situation was spiraling into something far more complicated than he had anticipated. Employees were scared, customers were getting turned away, and nobody, not even the store manager, seemed willing to explain why. He glanced back at Jake, who still looked as though he'd rather be anywhere else. The kid wasn't the problem, he was just following orders. Orders that Alex had never given. "All right," Alex said, voice steady. "If this is really store policy, then I need to hear it from someone in charge. Who's the manager here?" Jake shifted uncomfortably but gestured toward the customer service desk. "Linda," he muttered. Alex turned, spotting a woman in a neatly pressed store uniform flipping through some paperwork. She had an air of authority, but there was tension in her shoulders, like she was bracing for something. He made his way over, making sure to keep his pace casual. Just another annoyed customer looking for answers. "Excuse me," he said, watching as she glanced up with a polite but tired expression. "Yes, sir? I was just at checkout trying to buy an item, and your cashier refused to sell it to me. He says it's policy." He kept his voice even. "Mind explaining that to me?" The flicker in Linda's expression was subtle, but Alex caught it. She knew exactly what he was talking about. Her hands smoothed over the papers on the desk as if she needed something to keep them occupied. "I understand your frustration, sir, but we have a strict guideline in place." "What guideline?" Alex pressed. Her smile tightened. "It's part of the new no-sale policy." Alex raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly does that mean?" Linda hesitated. "I can't go into details." His stomach dropped. "I think you can," he said, his voice quiet but firm. She held his gaze for a moment longer before she glanced around, as if checking who might be listening. Finally, she sighed and leaned in slightly. "All I can say," she murmured, "is that not everyone is allowed to buy everything." A chill ran through Alex's spine. What the hell was going on in his store? Alex knew when someone was hiding something. Linda's vague response, the nervous glances from employees, the quiet frustration of customers being denied purchases. It all pointed to something deliberate. And if she wasn't going to give him answers, he'd just have to find them himself. Stepping away from the customer service desk, he casually walked down one of the main aisles, slowing his pace to observe. He needed to see who was being denied and who was getting what they wanted. First, it seemed random. A man in a business suit was turned away at checkout when he tried to buy a high-end blender. The cashier shook his head, murmured something apologetic, and the man stormed off. But just 5 minutes later, a young woman, dressed more casually, maybe mid-20s, picked up the exact same blender and had no issue paying for it. Alex narrowed his eyes. Further down, he spotted an elderly woman trying to buy a premium brand toaster. Another denial. The cashier shifted awkwardly, giving the same response Alex had received earlier. "I'm sorry, but I can't sell this item to you." Yet, just across the way, a younger man with an expensive watch and brand-name sneakers picked up a similar item and walked right through checkout with it. It wasn't about the item, it was about the customer. Alex's stomach twisted as the pieces started clicking together. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a supply issue or a faulty register system. There was a pattern, one that had been carefully put in place. Some customers, likely those flagged in a system somewhere, were being blocked from purchasing certain high-value items, while others were getting a free pass. A secret sorting system. His grip on the shopping cart tightened. This wasn't just some misguided pricing policy. This was intentional. And if his gut was right, this was much bigger than one store. Alex's pulse quickened as he stepped cautiously into the employee break room. He had lingered near the stockroom earlier, waiting for the right moment. Now, as the last employee on break stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind them, Alex slipped in quietly, moving toward a corner where he could remain unnoticed. The room itself was plain. An old coffee machine hummed in the corner, a vending machine flickered with a dim light, and a round table sat in the center, where two employees were seated with half-eaten sandwiches in front of them. Alex kept his head down, pretending to check his phone as he listened. "I swear, this whole system is a mess," one of them muttered, shaking his head. "Customers are getting angrier every day, and we're the ones who have to deal with it." "Tell me about it," the other sighed. "I had a lady yesterday nearly in tears because she couldn't buy a microwave." Meanwhile, some guy in a designer jacket walks in, flashes his gold status on the app, and suddenly it's all his. Alex's fingers tightened around his phone. "Gold status?" "Yeah," the first one scoffed. "Corporate's new loyalty ranking. Except they never actually told customers about it. They just started flagging accounts in the system. The preferred shoppers get full access to whatever's in stock. But everyone else? Too bad." The second employee shook his head. "It's disgusting. We're treating long-time customers like garbage just because they don't hit some invisible spending threshold. And the worst part? They don't even know. They just think it's bad luck." Alex clenched his jaw. So that's what this is. This wasn't just some clerical error. It wasn't a random mistake. His own company had created a secret loyalty system that denied products to everyday customers, prioritizing only those who met a hidden set of rules. And somehow he had never been told. His heart pounded as the conversation continued. "Think corporate would ever actually admit it? Not a chance," the first one muttered. "They're making too much money off it." Alex had heard enough. He turned and slipped out the door. This had gone far enough. Alex's hands hovered over the touchscreen register, his heart pounding as he navigated through the employee portal. He kept his expression neutral, pretending to check stock like any regular worker. The store was busy enough that no one paid him much attention, but he knew he didn't have much time. With a few quick taps, he bypassed the standard inventory dashboard and accessed the internal communications tab. A flood of memos and updates filled the screen, but one in particular caught his eye. He clicked. The document opened, and as Alex scanned the text, his stomach twisted. To maximize customer lifetime value, Cartermart has implemented the Loyalty Prioritization Initiative, LPI, an internal ranking system that assigns scores to customers based on their purchase history, spending frequency, and engagement with Cartermart financial products. This program ensures premium product availability for our highest value customers while limiting access for lower-tier shoppers. Employees must comply with these sales restrictions discreetly to avoid public concern. His grip on the screen tightened. This was intentional. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a supply issue. His company was deliberately blocking customers based on an algorithm, a secret scoring system that determined who deserved service and who didn't. He scrolled further. Scoring system. Gold status, unlimited access to premium and high-demand items. Preferred pricing and first pick of inventory. Silver status, access to most items, but restricted on select high-value products. General shopper, no priority access, subject to sale restrictions and hidden availability limits. Low-tier shopper, no access to select products. Purchase limits enforced without disclosure. Alex's jaw clenched. It was worse than he thought. Customers weren't just being ranked, they were being lied to. Now he understood why employees looked so uneasy, why customers were walking out confused and angry. His own company had built a system that secretly punished loyal, everyday shoppers in favor of maximizing profits from an elite few. And the worst part? The memo was signed by corporate leadership, but not by him. Alex stepped outside the store, his breath sharp in the cool evening air. His hands clenched around his phone as he scrolled through his contacts, searching for one name: Nathan Pierce. Nathan had been with Cartermart since the early days. He was one of the few executives Alex still trusted, or at least he hoped he could. If anyone could confirm the truth behind this scheme, it was him. Alex pressed call. The phone rang twice before Nathan picked up. "Alex? What's up?" His tone was casual, but there was a tension underneath, like he already knew why Alex was calling. Alex didn't waste time. "I'm at one of our stores, and I just found out about the Loyalty Prioritization Initiative." He let the words hang, waiting for Nathan's reaction. Silence. Then, a quiet sigh. "I was afraid you'd find out this way." Alex's stomach sank. "So it's true." Nathan hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Look, Alex, you know how things have been. Inventory issues, rising costs, supply chain delays." Head of sales pitched the initiative as a way to optimize revenue. They framed it as giving priority to our best customers, keeping them engaged. But Alex cut him off. "But what?" Another pause. The real reason was to cover up the shortages. Alex's grip tightened on his phone. "So instead of being honest with customers, we created a secret system to manipulate their purchases? To make them think products weren't available when they actually were." Nathan sighed again. "They figured most people wouldn't notice. If a gold-tier customer buys something first, no one questions why it wasn't available for someone else. And if a lower-tier customer gets denied, they just assume the store ran out." Alex shook his head in disbelief. "And I was never told?" Nathan hesitated again. "They said you wouldn't approve, so they bypassed you." The betrayal hit like a gut punch. His own leadership team had gone behind his back, twisting his company's values into deception. Alex's voice was cold. "Who signed off?" Nathan exhaled. "James Calloway, head of sales." Alex nodded slowly, jaw tightening. "Not anymore." The call ended, but Alex wasn't finished. This wasn't just about one bad policy. This was about trust, and tomorrow heads would roll. The store's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Alex Carter stepped back inside, this time with a different purpose. Gone was the quiet, unassuming shopper persona. He walked with intent, his presence demanding attention. Employees barely glanced at him, continuing their work, completely unaware that their CEO had just entered their store. Not for long. Alex spotted the store manager, Linda, at the service desk, speaking with a cashier. He strode straight up to her. "I need a store-wide meeting now." Linda turned, startled by the direct command. "Sir, I'm not sure we can just..." "Now," Alex repeated, his voice firm. Something in his tone must have struck her, because she nodded quickly, calling employees over the intercom for an immediate staff meeting. Confused workers trickled in from aisles and the stockroom, whispering among themselves. It wasn't every day that a customer called for a meeting. When the last of the staff had gathered, Alex exhaled sharply. Then, in one swift motion, he pulled off his baseball cap, straightened his posture, and looked them in the eyes. "My name is Alex Carter," he said, his voice steady. "I'm the CEO of Carter Mart." The reaction was immediate. Shocked gasps, eyes widening in disbelief. A few employees stiffened, looking pale as they processed what had just happened. The silence stretched before Alex continued. "I came here undercover to see how my stores were really operating. What I found was unacceptable." He glanced toward Linda, whose face was frozen with apprehension. "This store and others have been enforcing a no-sale policy for certain customers, restricting access to products based on a hidden loyalty system that I never approved." More murmurs. Some employees exchanged nervous glances. One of the cashiers, Jake, the same employee who had denied Alex the purchase, shifted uncomfortably. "I know this wasn't your fault," Alex said, addressing the staff. "I know you were following orders, but I also know some of you felt it was wrong." He let that sink in before turning back to Linda. "Did you?" She hesitated, swallowing hard. We were told by corporate that it was policy. I didn't agree with it, but I was afraid to push back. If we questioned it, we were told we didn't understand company priorities." Alex nodded grimly. He had expected as much. "Let me make this clear," he said, his voice carrying through the store. "That policy is gone, effective immediately." The tension in the room broke. Some employees exhaled in relief, others nodded in agreement. The weight of corporate fear had been lifted, but Alex wasn't done yet. "Tomorrow, I'll be having a meeting with senior executives. This deception ends here, and if anyone at the top thinks they can get away with it, they'll find themselves out of a job." The employees stood in stunned silence, absorbing the weight of his words. Linda looked at him, her expression shifting from fear to something else, respect. And for the first time in a long time, Alex Carter felt like a true leader again. The morning sun cast long beams of light through the front windows of Carter Mart as Alex Carter stepped inside once again. This time there was no disguise, no hat to pull low over his face, no need to play the part of a frustrated customer. He walked in as himself, the CEO who had come to make things right. The energy in the store was different. It wasn't just business as usual. Employees moved with a sense of ease, smiling as they helped customers. There was no longer a quiet tension lingering beneath the surface. The unspoken fear of pushing a sale too hard or turning someone away unfairly had disappeared. Near the front registers he spotted Jake. The young cashier who had unknowingly refused to sell him an item just days ago was busy ringing up a customer. This time, there was no hesitation in his voice, no awkward apologies or nervous glances over his shoulder. The customer finished paying, thanked him, and walked away with their purchase, just like any other shopper should. Alex stepped forward. Jake turned, his eyes widening slightly. He still wasn't used to seeing the CEO of Carter Mart standing in front of his register. "Mr. Carter," he said quickly, standing a little straighter. Alex shook his head. "Alex," he corrected. "I wanted to thank you." Jake blinked. "For what?" "For doing the right thing," Alex said. "You followed what you were told was policy, but you also didn't try to hide that something felt off about it. That honesty is why we're fixing this." A flicker of relief crossed Jake's face, and he nodded. I didn't like it. I knew customers would feel cheated." "They did," Alex admitted. "But that's over now." He glanced around the store, watching employees interact freely with customers, without fear of some hidden rule dictating who was worthy of certain purchases. And it's not just about fixing a bad policy. It's about making sure it never happens again. Jake exhaled, as if letting go of the last bit of anxiety he had carried. "I'm glad." Alex turned to Linda, who had been watching quietly from a few feet away. The store manager gave him a small, grateful nod. He returned it. She had made mistakes, yes, but she had also stepped up when it mattered. Before he left, Alex took one last look at the store. "When you start deciding who deserves better service, you lose what really matters: trust," he said to Linda, Jake, and the surrounding employees. "Trust is why customers come back. It's why companies survive. And from now on, Carter Mart is a place that earns it." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving behind a business that was finally back on the right path.